Before America was an idea, it was a wilderness. Endless forests, rolling rivers, and ancient lands already home to millions. Native nations thrived here long before European sails appeared on the horizon, from the Iroquois of the Northeast to the Powhatan along the Atlantic coast, each with their own language, culture, and territory. Then came 1607, the year Jamestown was founded in Virginia. 104 English settlers stepped ashore, chasing fortune, faith, and survival. But the dream of a new world was far harsher than they imagined. Starvation, disease, and conflict consumed the colony. More than half the settlers died within months. The Powhatan people, led by Chief Powhatan, offered uneasy aid, trading food for tools and weapons. But misunderstanding and mistrust ran deep. The story of early America began not with unity, but with struggle. A fragile coexistence that teetered between cooperation and war. As the 1600s unfolded, more ships arrived, bringing settlers from England, Holland, and beyond. The Pilgrims landed at Plymouth in 1620, fleeing religious persecution and seeking a place to worship freely. They forged the Mayflower Compact, one of the first written agreements for self-government in the New World. In the North, Puritans built strict, God-fearing communities. In the South, vast plantations rose, powered by the forced labor of enslaved Africans. The transatlantic slave trade became the dark foundation of colonial prosperity. Tobacco, rice, and later cotton brought wealth, but at an unbearable human cost. By the early 1700s, 13 distinct colonies stretched along the Atlantic coast. Each had its own identity. Massachusetts with its Puritan piety, Pennsylvania with its Quaker tolerance, Virginia with its plantation aristocracy. Yet all shared something new, a sense that they were not quite British anymore. A new identity was forming, American. Across the ocean, the British Empire was reaching for dominance. But power breeds enemies. France and Britain clashed for control of the seas and the colonies. Their rivalry ignited the French and Indian. So 1754-1763, the North American theater of a global struggle known as the 7 Years' War. Young George Washington, just 22, led a small Virginia militia in a skirmish that helped spark the conflict. Over the next 9 years, the colonies became a battlefield. British redcoats fought French troops and native allies across the Appalachian frontier. When the smoke cleared, Britain emerged victorious, gaining Canada and vast western lands. But victory came with a heavy price, staggering debt. To recover, Parliament decided the colonies should pay their share. Taxes, tariffs, and trade restrictions soon followed, and with them, resentment. The first spark came with the Stamp Act of 1765, taxing newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards. For colonists, this wasn't just about money, it was about principle. How could Parliament tax them when they had no representatives? In London, the cry spread, no taxation without representation. In Boston, resistance grew fierce. Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty organized protests and boycotts. Pamphlets and newspapers fanned the flames of defiance. Then came blood. In 1770, British soldiers opened fire on an angry crowd, the Boston Massacre, killing 5. 3 years later, the Boston Tea Party sent a message the Crown could not ignore. Disguised as Mohawk warriors, colonists boarded British ships and dumped hundreds of chests of tea into the harbor. London responded with fury, shutting down Boston's port and sending more troops. The colonies, once divided, began to unite under a single belief. Their freedom was at stake. April 1775. British troops marched toward Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons. Waiting for them were local militias, farmers, blacksmiths, and shopkeepers. At dawn, a shot rang out. No one knows who fired it, but it became known as the shot heard round the world. Within hours, the countryside erupted. Militia units, known as Minutemen, swarmed the British forces. What began as a search-and-seize mission turned into open battle. News of the fighting raced through the colonies. The Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia, appointing George Washington as commander of a newly formed Continental Army. The struggle for independence had begun. For over a year, the colonies fought without declaring independence. Many still hoped for reconciliation with the crown. But the war changed hearts and minds. In 1776, Thomas Paine's common sense captured the moment. "'Tis time to part." His words electrified the colonies. Independence was no longer treason, it was destiny. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed. Crafted by Thomas Jefferson, it boldly proclaimed that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights. The document was radical, a declaration not just of separation, but of humanity's right to self-rule. It was both a promise and a paradox, for in a land of liberty, many remained enslaved. Still, the colonies had crossed the point of no return. They would live free, or die trying. The war that followed was long and brutal. Washington's army, so poorly equipped and underfed, faced the world's most powerful military. In New York, they suffered crushing defeats. The Continental Army retreated again and again, morale crumbling with each loss. But Washington refused to quit. On Christmas night, 1776, in one of history's boldest moves, he crossed the icy Delaware River and struck the Hessian garrison at Trenton. The victory was small but symbolic, proof that hope was still alive. Meanwhile, the war spread beyond battlefields. Families were torn apart, towns burned. Women like Abigail Adams, Martha Washington, and countless unnamed others kept farms, running, raised children, and supported the cause from home. Slaves were promised freedom for fighting. Some joined the British, others the Patriots, each hoping that liberty would one day mean them too. By 1777, fortune began to turn. At Saratoga, American forces under General Horatio Gates defeated the British. The victory convinced France to join the fight, bringing ships, soldiers, and money that the Revolution desperately needed. The war was no longer just America versus Britain. It was a global conflict. The winter at Valley Forge tested the limits of endurance. Washington's men froze, starved, and died by the hundreds. Yet through that suffering came discipline and unity. A Prussian officer, Baron von Steuben, drilled the army into a professional fighting force. Out of hardship emerged strength, and by spring, Washington's troops marched with newfound confidence. Battles flared across the colonies, in the north at Monmouth and in the south, where Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, waged guerrilla warfare against British patrols. By 1780, the tide was turning. The British, weary of fighting, shifted south, hoping to rally loyalists. Instead, they found fierce resistance from patriots who had nothing left to lose. In 1781, fate brought both armies to Yorktown, Virginia. British General Charles Cornwallis entrenched his forces by the coast, unaware that Washington and his French allies were closing in. With French Admiral de Grasse's fleet blocking the bay and Washington's troops surrounding the city, Cornwallis was trapped. The siege lasted weeks. Cannon fire pounded British defenses day and night. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. The war was not officially over, but the fight was finished. Against all odds, a group of colonies had defeated an empire. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris, 1783, made it official. Britain recognized the United States of America as a free and independent nation. But independence was just the beginning. The young country faced questions that no war could answer: how to govern, how to unite, and how to live up to the ideals it had proclaimed. The Revolution had birthed liberty, but also contradiction. The same document that declared all men equal existed in a nation where slavery endured. Native Americans, who had fought for their own survival, saw their lands claimed and promises broken. Yet for all its flaws and failings, the American Revolution lit a fire that spread across the world, inspiring revolts, republics, and revolutions from France to Latin America. It proved that people could challenge kings, rewrite destiny, and demand a voice in their own future. From Jamestown to Yorktown, from colonists to citizens, the story of America's birth is one of courage, contradiction, and conviction. It was never perfect, but it was powerful. A story of ordinary people daring to imagine something extraordinary, freedom. They built not just a country, but an idea. That government should serve the governed, that liberty is worth the fight, and that even the smallest voices can change the course of history. And so out of 176 years of struggle, sacrifice, and revolution, a nation was born. The United States of America. An experiment still unfolding. A dream still worth defending.